Guys, Roland here, and I'm back with the second part of my amazing conversation with Randy Veitenheimer, where we are learning about his unusual spiritual life journey. And we will pick this up right after this intro message. Welcome to Conversations with Roland, where the goal of this show is to learn life secrets through diverse experiences. I am your host, Roland Achenjang. Guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Roland. As always, I am super excited to record these conversations, and today is no different. Today with me is an amazing guest who you're already familiar with. They are a regular on Conversations with Roland, and this conversation is actually part 2 of a conversation we started earlier discussing about my guest's unusual spiritual life journey. And I'm speaking of none other than one of my very good friends and mentors, Randy Veitenheimer. Randy, welcome back. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you again, Roland.
Likewise. It's been a while.
Yeah. Everybody's still alive and still healthy. So,
Indeed, I'm grateful for that. And
yeah.
Just randomly, Randy, this conversation is actually being recorded by popular demand. I've had a bunch of your fans ask me when the second conversation is going to be out, and I thought I better not wait anymore. If not, they'll be coming after me. So
I've had a bunch of people ask too, like, tell me more, So.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear more. And our last conversation, we ended up in some very interesting parts. We definitely left room. It's like a soap opera. We definitely left at a cliff where, of course, people are excited to come back and listen to more of your spiritual life journey. And if I can even add, it's wonderful to hear, and I've told you why. It provides an opportunity for us to learn a different way to experience life on Earth, to see opportunities that we may have had in our lives that were similar, but because of different choices that we made, we ended up in a different path than you did. There are just so many life lessons here. But I see a painting behind you, Randy, and I don't know if that's your painting. I just want to throw that out quick. Okay. Yes. And I've also seen a bunch of your paintings posted on Facebook by you. And I would just like to ask when you picked up painting and what that's like for you.
I picked it up in 4th grade. So I had a teacher named Miss Gregory, and she thought we should all be Renaissance painters. So she brought in all the classics, and gave us a box of crayons. so my initial forays into painting were with crayons, and but she would talk about the classic techniques, and I laugh because people sometimes say, well, where'd you learn to paint? And I said, well, I've been classically trained, right? As far as the techniques were transmitted, but the materials you had at hand to work with were crayons and construction papers. So that's pretty funny. Anyway, I started painting and drawing back then, and I always liked it, and I've always done it. It's just that, like in high school, I started oil painting, but it wasn't a manly thing to do back then, So I kind of gave it up, and then a fascinating story is Sitting Bull's great-great-granddaughter was a friend of mine up in Santa Fe, and she goes, "You should paint." And I go, "I don't want to be a starving artist, right?" And she goes, "Well, you should paint. You're good." And I go, "No, I'm a great artist. Remember, I've been classically trained." So what I did, and it's true for anybody, is like, I didn't want to do that because it takes money. It takes time to develop those skill sets. And it is well, that's all. Everybody has it. Everybody paints or draws. It's just, it's a creative act that we all do.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, I started taking so much money out of my paycheck every week, and I would go down to artisans and buy canvases or paints or brushes or something. And literally after 2 years, I started painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I wanted to reach for a canvas, I didn't want to only have one or be limited to the size I had, or same thing on the paints. And so, and then if we catch up to today, I finally built a little studio. I used to have a big studio years ago, but I moved, and I finally got a new studio worked out, and I started painting again. And so the one behind me is one of them that my girlfriend said, "You're not selling that one," because I like it.
There you go. You got you got a number one fan in your house there, Randy.
Oh yeah. So I love to paint, and Tribes 131 Gallery in Norman, Oklahoma handles my work.
Okay.
And anybody's welcome to go look. And I paint across a pretty broad range of subjects and stuff, because it's being creative. And that gets back to, kind of like what happened in high school. Right after high school, I started studying Kung Fu. And so Kung Fu says Kung Fu is everything. It's one of those little maxims. And Grandmaster George Ng was my first teacher, and he said, like, if you study Kung Fu, it should show up if you're a waiter. It should show up if you're the chef. It should show up if you're dancing. In other words, that type of training. And it's training in movement and awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it all kind of goes together. It's painting is a form of meditation in certain martial arts, and especially in the Japanese arts. So it all kind of fits together in a weird way, which is me.
I can see that. One thing you said that I appreciated was the fact that even after you got this classical training in the 4th grade, later on when you were working and making money, you set aside some of it to buy the canvases, etc.
Right.
But you mentioned it still took you 2 years to continue to hone your skill. And that just struck me, because many times when people want to learn something, they want the results tomorrow or within a month, right? I tell people I've been meditating many years, and it was 4 years into my meditation when I had my awakening. And when people hear that, they're like, that's a long time. And that's all relative. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. And unless you're really serious about experiencing or making changes in your life, usually you have to be dedicated over an extended period of time. So
I agree. I definitely agree. It's anything you do, like painting, any kind of art form, any creativity, you can express yourself. That's one. And then techniques and training become a way to refine what you're already going to do, you might say, and maybe give you a better or different way of doing it. And so one of the things about being classically trained is all great artists have a signature. They have a way of expressing themselves. And if you look at every one of those, none of them were they were all classically trained. Picasso, go down a list a mile long, but each of them came up with a style that was their own and recognizable. So whether it's cooking or writing or painting, you're not here to mimic in a certain way, right? All artists steal ideas, by the way. But you are certainly here to try to improve on it or express it in a different way. And of course, that's in everybody's individual life. That's what makes you an individual. Is I did it my way, right? So,
absolutely.
Probably write a song about it.
I think there's a rap song about it that popped in my head. I just can't. I don't want to rap right now because my voice is going to sound awful and people are going to stop listening to Conversations with Roland. But it's funny, we're talking about painting. Look at this.
Oh, yeah. You've been busy.
I'm refining my painting skills.
Yeah.
No, this is neat. Well, I'm glad we threw that on. You talk about Tribes 131, where people can go and get your paintings. And please, guys, if you find any value in the stuff that Randy does, that's one awesome way you can support him, by getting his paintings. So, like, your life is super fascinating. When we ended up in the last conversation, we talked about an unusual experience that happened when you were 10 years old. You talked about it, a gap in your earthly experience. I don't know if you feel comfortable picking back up right there, and then we can continue. Sure.
Yes. Just a little background. I'm working on, a book 10 years out called Theory of Approximate Reality. And it's a popular subject today, but we all have an aggregate reality, I'll call it. And that reality represents different domains of information or different morphic fields. I have a work, I have a family, I have a physical, mental, spiritual. All these things are kind of like bubbles of information on one of those charts or something, a pie chart. And you can see how much time you spend in each of them, okay? And of course, whether you develop one of them over another, right? Depends on how much time and focus and energy you give to it, okay? And so then we go, well, why do I like one thing or one subject and somebody like another, okay? And that gets into information flows that are not necessarily conscious. So we have an unconscious connection to the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, that supplies some form of direction or something, or some idea or goals. That's what I've found out. It's like you can express like reason and ration, like why do I paint? But ultimately it comes down to I just like it, okay? And ultimately we could say the same thing for any occupation you have, or any pursuit of knowledge that follows a particular path, like you can follow it through religion or through spirituality or through dance. All of those are literally a religion. Martial arts is a religion. And so it depends on how much devotion and energy you give. But when things, we used to say, come out of the blue, I don't know what that means, but things would occur to you. And at 10 years old, I lost a few days. And so that was one of those things. I was walking home. I'd been playing at a friend's house, and I don't remember. I never made it home. All I remember is like that was like a Thursday or Friday, and my next memory is like Monday. Okay, so what was that about? Now my mother says that I was still able to talk and eat stuff. I've talked to her about it, right? But conscious-wise, I don't know where I was. I do know that there were some changes afterwards. And one of them was that starting about that time period, I had an eidetic memory. And what that means is like, I'd pick up a book and flip through it. And if you ask me a question, I could tell you paragraph, sentence, page number, the whole thing. And I didn't really meet anybody else like that until I was maybe late 20s. And then very recently, there's a gentleman named David Adair, and he's on some of the Gaia stuff too. And we were at dinner one night, and he started talking about 10 years old, he had an experience, and afterwards he'd come out with eidetic memory and this ability to, I'll call it, navigate conversations and information like really fast. And the same thing was true for me. Now, the eidetic memory, I'm a little older now, and it skips in and out. But I still get questions where people go like, how the heck do you know all this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I've been working at it, that's what I would tell you. But it's the ability to move forward, like in a conversation, to move forward in that conversation and see in. So I don't like to say I'm talking over somebody, it's just I recognize the whole conversation and I'm already ahead of it. And so that becomes a rudeness of talking over people. But that was one of the skill sets. And the other one was, the one I just talked about is one of knowingness. like you know immediately all kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that led to, people say like being intuitive, which is what I teach, and at a certain level, awareness, intuition, and the truly intuitive person is a phenomenon in the universe. In other words, you have the ability to be very powerful. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you apply that with Qigong, Qigong, the ability to manipulate certain energies, then now you have a powerful combination for healing, or for creativity, or for what it is you're doing. And I'm certainly not unique, because it can show up in somebody cooking for their family. It can show somebody making clothes for somebody, or engineering things, or fixing things. To me, people that can fix problems like a car or a house or something are highly intuitive, highly creative, because that information is just not readily available unless you go perfect those skill sets. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's what happened at 10. Okay. So.
No. Okay. Randy, thanks for that. There's something I want to add. This whole experience of amazing recall after you read books, I've experienced that talking to you. Mm-hmm. And just real quick, you might even remember the name of the book, and I don't think I do. It might be The Microcosmic God, I think, by Theodore Sturgeon. I think that's the book. But there was a while, about 2 years ago, I was talking to you about this book that I just read, and I said the book was very fascinating. It's a science fiction book, but there were so many similarities between the book and what's happening on planet Earth, as far as when we receive intuitive information, tools, technology, ideas that we can use and then implement it the way we want. And I don't think and I think you do remember this, where this guy created a group of, I don't know if they were nanobots or like Android, and then he would basically give them tools, and then they would learn to be self-sustaining.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was odd, because I had just heard about that book, but that book was out, I think, in the 60s, and you had read it way back when, and you remembered exactly what I was talking about. So yeah, that recall is definitely legitimate. And then also having that forward thinking, or being able to see where somebody is going to end up in maybe a sentence that they're making, and catching yourself and not being essentially rude when you're having a conversation by finishing it for them. I have that experience too sometimes, and it can come off as being impatient or short. But yeah, so fascinating about the time when you were 10 years old. You don't remember that time, but you were still on planet Earth. It wasn't like you were missing, and there wasn't a we need to go find Randy.
No, I have no. It's a blank spot. One of the things about humans is we hate blank spots. Like if you pass out or have a high fever or lose time, it's like it makes you nervous, right? Because you don't know what happened during that time period. So, and thank God there wasn't video cameras back then and cell phones, because there was a lot of insanity going on. Yeah. And a lot of people passing out and having parties and things that, like I say, you don't know what happened, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't, it's not even I can say I was somewhere else or anything. It's kind of like the light bulb dimmed for a while and then came back on,
Okay.
And but David Dare related the same experiences. He related the same. He came back with a fascination at 10 or 12 years old in rocketry and all this other stuff and science, and I did too. And I got kicked out of chemistry school, chemistry class, 10th grade, for making something called nitroglycerin in school, and they had to shut the school down. And then I started building rockets, and the Air Force showed up and said, you can't be sending rockets into commercial airspace, and shut that down. And there was always instead of encouraging me, they were always blocking me, probably safer for the planet that they did, because I was an inquisitive mind. And the idea is to take any idea or any subject and run with it, right?
Wait, so you're saying the Air Force actually visited you and
Oh
spoke
yeah,
to you about your
we were
activities?
launching rockets. We were building made rockets, a friend of mine and I, and they showed up and they said, your last rocket was 8,000 feet, and that's commercial airspace, right? And we're like, dang, what went wrong? We figured we'd hit between 11 and 12. We need to go revamp our formulas. And we're saying this, and they're going, no, you can't do no more. we're shutting you down. So,
When was this?
I was probably 14 at that time.
Oh, this is still down in Oklahoma?
yeah.
Oh, crazy.
So apparently, I love science. My parents bought me the biggest whatever chemistry set when I was 8, 9 years old. And it probably took me 3 days to blow up the little tool shed behind the house. Yeah, boys and explosives. What can I say, right?
What can you? I'm glad you still have your
Now
fingers,
I
Randy.
think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go.
But science was like, the idea of it. They say a new frontier or whatever. There is no limit on science.
No, none.
You can. And so then out of that, science fiction has become, of course, a fascination, starting with Amazing Tales or something when I was like probably 7 or 8, 9 years. Here we go again. So all this kind of coalesced around the same time. And so I was reading tons of science fiction by the time I was 10 or 12 years old. And in fact, I'm doing a little book review. It'll be a little conversation. I think it's called Gravity University. And we're going to on Dorsai, Dorsai will be the first book. And I've made like 140 notes in there because in Chinese teaching, mythology, whatever, Taoist thinking, any one book can provide enlightenment. Any one book can provide a path through life or goals or things to do. And even better, if you read them properly, they can provide an understanding of life and the universe and everything else. And it doesn't have to be a religious text. And it's a science fiction book. And the funny thing about that book, I was rereading it one time in DC, in Crystal City at a little restaurant. And a guy comes over, and he's from DOD, and he goes, wow, you're reading Dorsai, we're using that book. And I go, really? Because it deals with strategy, right? It deals with a lot of things, but the life lessons in it are much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I agreed to kind of do a review of that. So
that's neat.
So yeah, because like I said, it's what was it? Simon and Garfunkel, the word prophet are written on the subway walls, tenement halls. And what that means is that knowledge is valuable, not from who wrote it or who said it, but
just that
as it means something. It comes to a point of meaning to you. And when that happens, who the heck cares? Yeah. And yet our society's so obsessed, well, this person wrote it or that person said it or whatever. And I've learned more from cab drivers, in DC than you learn from a political science book,
Yeah, right.
You don't know who or what you're dealing with. All you can do is take the information and see what you can know with it. Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Along those lines, and we're digressing a little bit here, but we talked about fiction or science fiction. Yeah. I would like to ask what fiction means to you. And the reason I'm asking is because of this. In the spiritual community, we have this understanding that if you think it, means it exists, right? And if you're thinking about thoughts are a unique expression of consciousness. Thoughts are a way God, provides you opportunities to make decisions, and then you can, with your decision making, passion and will, create reality or create physical matter based off the thoughts that you have. So like conversations with Roland, granted it's not physical matter, but this existence on planet Earth was once a thought that before did not exist. And so if we look at what science fiction has done for us, it has always helped us improve our society, right? In the Western way of looking at life, to have a more comfortable life, a more safe life, etc. And so science fiction at some level may not really be fiction. It may just be ideas that already exist
Yes.
that
It's
someone's translating.
the language I use is science fiction is imagination. Okay. Reality is science fiction where imagination comes into reality. Okay. So when somebody writes something like Heinlein or Aspinall or whoever, Delancey, there's thousands of them. Each of them is expressing something out of their imagination, because none of this stuff existed, right? From cell phones to whatever, but it's all right there in science fiction. And when you look at it in an interrogative way and an analytical way, then all of a sudden it's like you can look backwards and say, well, that happened or that became true. The Foundation series by Aspinall is one of them. And that one still is being played out, obviously. But the other thing it does is you can look out ahead a little bit and go, I think I'll make a cell phone. I think I'll build a spaceship. And Elon Musk, when they ask him what's his favorite books, the Foundation series by Aspinall, because there's all the imagination in the world and the universe right there. And the way they divide up the universe between the intellectual or scientific and the spiritual and psychological worlds has a lot to say with our current state of affairs in the world. And manipulation of all three, science and religion and psychology, is like, that's where we are right now. And there's people and forces at work, and they're all having a great time.
They are. I like that quote. Reality is the experience of imagination.
And then the creative aspect is to bring imagination into reality. And that's where most people do imagination, is fantasizing. Well, fantasizing doesn't create anything. But when you take imagination and then I can bring that into this reality by doing A, B, C, D, E, G, that's how you perceive. So if I read about a rocket with, whoever, Starship Troopers or and then it's like, well, I can make a rocket. Let me see how I go about that, And it's true for anything. I mean, I always say, if somebody has written it down, I can look at it and I can see if I can improve on it. Here we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And of course, that becomes entertaining. It becomes some sort of joyful act to be involved in bringing imagination into reality.
Yes. And it's all we're doing every time we create something, right? Every time we say something, every time we do something that we feel like doing or we say no, that's, whether we are consciously aware of it or not, some form of expressing what we're imagining.
Exactly.
So let's shift. Where can we go to next? What other areas in your life do you think were, I think you call them nodes?
I'll go 12 to 18 was just, I was being more intuitive. Okay. If we tell people, Colin Wilson wrote a book called The Outsider, and I read it by the time I was about 14 or 15 or something. And there's a passage in about the first, 30 pages in or something, that says this young boy, 12 years old, could see himself standing outside the house, looking through the dining room window and seeing everybody, including himself. I have that experience. And so at that time, same thing, then my mother would be cooking dinner and I'd go, by the way, Uncle Ike's comes by, right? It's like, I just knew things, set an extra plate, right? The telephone ring, oh, it's for you, Dad, or something like that. And so rather than burn me at the stake, they thought it was funny, and and so I kept doing more and more. And literally by the time I was 16, people would come to me and go, I have a problem. And I'd go, well, let me see if I can figure out what's going on. And so by the time I was 18, then I just wanted to get away, right? Like everybody. I tell all 18-year-olds out there, never run away out of anger. Anger won't take you far enough, right? It's insufficient. But a lot of people leave home out of anger and fighting and things like that. And it's like better by choice. If you make a choice, then you're probably going to make it to whatever goal you want to make, but not out of anger.
Yeah.
So,
except they say the choice is, I'm so angry, I'm leaving.
yeah. But you don't need to be.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened, like we went through periods of extreme poverty, literally living on riverbanks for 3 months at a time, or on a lake shore, and what do you call, like foraging? Like we would pick up pecans on the half shell, is what it was called. And what that means, you get a 55-gallon sack of burlap sack of pecans, you'd sell them, and you get to keep half the money. And whoever the land belonged to, you would give back their half. I learned a lot of skills back then. A lot of people now would be horrified to have to go through those kind of things. But if you looked at them as just skill sets, I had skill sets. I learned to fish, I learned to hunt, I learned to forage, and a lot of people grow up mad about the poverty and things that they went through. But, you should have learned a skill set out of it, and know that should you have to, you can still do that. Okay.
Yeah.
And that happens, you go out of the anger you feel towards your parents or yourself. And so, if you don't do that, then around 21, you're really depressed. And, that's what happened to me. And then I realized, well, that's just stupid to be depressed. So I quit, and I was able to do that. And then progressing right on, two things happened. When I was 14 or so, 13, I picked up a book called Chuang Tzu, Genius of the Absurd. I'm in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, at 13 years old, picking up a book on Chinese mythology. And it made me so crazy because I couldn't understand it. I would throw it. And that's where I picked up the habit of throwing books because if they make me mad or I don't understand. And I would go pick it up a month later, and I finally worked my way through it. And then, like 10 years ago, I pick it up and I go, this is just the silliest thing I've ever heard, because it's so simple to understand. But then because of that book, I started studying the Kung Fu, and I got transferred from mastering to Grandmaster R.K. Wong in LA, and studying there, eventually started the Kundalini yoga, and all of that allowed me to change what I was given and what I had been through.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt you there. I'm glad you mentioned what actually drove you to starting Kung Fu, because I was gonna ask if you picking up Kung Fu. Actually, I remember you saying because you wanted to fight better, because you're always in fights. Right. And then I thought, were you fighting because people thought you were this weird kid who could use your intuition to help people? Was that a reason, or were most people looking at you favorably because of this ability that you had?
I was not popular, right? And whether I vibrated a frequency that said let's fight or not, I don't know. I probably had a lot of anger or whatever. Yeah. But this was a daily occurrence. And then the insanity of it was, I grew up in the 60s, and if you watch that movie American Graffiti, that was true. We drove down the street and stuff, and the fights would start. It was just something you did, and I know people can't understand the sanity. I can't even imagine it. Yeah, like get 5 guys together, and let's go start a fight, Seminole or Oklahoma City or somewhere, and so that was all pretty funny, right? Yeah. I mean, now looking backwards, if you look at it at the time, that was nuts. That's insane to, be in a gang, we'll call it, right? Mm-hmm. And so all this is common to everybody's experience. They have some experience of this themselves or family or somebody.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we're
it
all in a gang in
yeah,
some way. I mean, if
yeah,
like right now the NBA finals are going on, and if you
yeah.
have any affinity to any particular team, it's like a
You're part of the
gang.
gang.
you, maybe you're not, but
Yeah,
you're part of the gang as well, right? It's like second
yeah,
chakra stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Manchester United
there
soccer
you
team
go.
and gang. So, and I
There you
love
go.
those guys. So, but
Um,
anyway,
yeah.
yes. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that at the time you have all those experiences, you don't realize that um, they were things, if you survived them, that they might have contained some information that would help you,
Hmm.
right? And of course, when you're in the middle of it, you don't. And that's the thing about the science fiction again. They're giving you information, and you haven't coalesced it into an operating program, or maybe you have. If if all you come out of it is a bunch of programs that cause you to be very limited in your ability to live and be alive and healthy and wealthy and all that, those are bad programs that need to be gotten rid of. And that's what I do when I work on people, is eliminate a lot of the negative programs. Right?
Yeah.
So, and everybody has them. I mean, I don't care who you are. So
Yeah. You can't operate on this planet. I think part of the agreement is to come and
yeah,
work with or learn to work with the negative programs, essentially, or because
right.
they can benefit you at some point.
Oh yeah,
I see that, especially in politics.
right.
You see a lot of politicians use those aspects of themselves for their benefits. Even we as individuals, I'm not just saying them. If you're
Yeah.
skilled enough,
Yeah.
you could tap into that. Randy, do you mind telling us a little bit more about your Kundalini yoga training
Uh-huh.
experiences?
Yes, that first of all, there's kind of two opinions. One of them is you're going to die if you study Kundalini yoga, and there was a book written about that and Kundalini rising and how horrible it is, whatever. And then there's another side. But here's the thing that happened: Master Ing, Master George Zing, he's recently named Supreme Grand Master of China, by the way, the top dog, whatever. When I got ready to leave and go to LA, he said, okay, here's a letter you study with Grandmaster R.K. Wong. And it's very traditional to pass you on to the next teacher, right? To be introduced. And the second thing he said to me is study Kundalini Yoga. And I went, I had no idea what he's talking about. Back then there wasn't internet. So I go to the library and I start looking and I find some references to it. And all of them said you had to go to India to study, okay? And so I thought, well, okay. And then in 71 or 2, Yogi Bhajan came to the United States and started teaching Kundalini Yoga in LA, right? Remember, I'd gone there to study Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
So there was sort of a convergence there. And I'll say this, Kundalini Yoga, practiced properly, has the greatest ability to change your consciousness and your physical body and being. That's it. From everything I've studied in my whole life, it's not about the teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teacher of Kundalini Yoga, all they do, oh my God, you're the teacher, you're the right. And I'm like, no, I'm Randy, okay? You can leave all that stuff alone because this is just going to be your own experience. And that's the way I look at it. But one of the things that was interesting, how did he know about Kundalini Yoga in 1968, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that happened was that you couldn't find it. It was all in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you went to India, you might find a teacher, and after 10 years, a teacher won Kriya or something. And Kriya Yoga and Kundalini Yoga, there's Kriyas in Kundalini Yoga. It's literally all yogas combined. They call it all 8 limbs of yoga combined. And so I was in Carmel or Monterey, and I go to Monterey Junior College, and there's a little table set up, and a lady sitting there going Kundalini Yoga classes. And I was probably 23 or so by then. And I walked up to the table and I go, sign me up. She goes, do you want to know about it? And I go, nope, because my teacher, Master Ing, had told me to study it. I go to the first class, and that's important. I go through the first class, and it's breathing exercises, pranayama, it's a little body position, all these different things. But at the end of class, you do layout, okay? And so you lay down. All I remember later is somebody going, come back, come back, come back. And I could hear myself go, no. I'm making t-shirts up that say no, okay? Because I wasn't going to do it, right? I was gone, right? And I finally, she come back, and I finally woke up, and Stock Curtain Car was holding my feet and rubbing my feet, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. And she goes, oh, you're back. She goes, well, I have to go home. I, have kids or whatever.
You held her up, Randy.
Yeah. And I go, how long you been rubbing my feet? That was the question. She goes, 2.5 hours, right? For 2.5 hours, she had been trying to drag me back out of the universe wherever I'd got to,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. And that is a transformative experience, right? And so at that point, I'm like, I'm going to class, and that's where we started that 3:45 in the morning till 6 hours of yoga a day and doing all this stuff. And during that time period, of course, you develop certain skills and intuition and knowledge and awareness, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And of course, at one point they said, well, now you need to teach, and that's when I started teaching it. And so now every once in a while I teach it individuals, but I don't do classes as a rule anymore. Right?
Okay. That's amazing. I've had similar experiences, but I want to ask you, and I'll tell you outside, just because this is about Randy Veitenheimer. I can't be here telling you about my experiences. But what do you refer to as Kriyas? And I'm asking because I understand Kriyas to be this automatic body movements that might actually have you end up in all the yoga positions that I've been doing consciously. So in deep meditative states, I would end up in like downward facing dog. And
a Kriya, very simple. Remember, yoga, Kundalini yoga is all 8 branches of yoga. So pranayama, right?
Mm-hmm.
Raja yoga, which is the focus, okay? Hatha yoga, which is a body position, okay? Mudra yoga, which means there's generally a hand position. Mm-hmm. And then mantra, there's a sound current that you're tapping into. Mm-hmm. And you think about it, it's, you ever see one of those people that was one-man band and they're playing the drums and this, right? You're trying to do all those things at once, okay? Mm-hmm. So what happens is your consciousness has to literally expand to encompass all those actions, right? Mm-hmm. All those different areas of attention, we'll call it. It causes you to grow in consciousness. So all these people are out there right now talking about ascension, okay? Mm-hmm. The implication is there's a certain growth in your consciousness. And, without naming names and being rude, they don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Name names, Randy. We need some drama in our lives.
You're not supposed to talk bad about anybody like Greg Braden or Billy Carson or, what's Joe Dispenza or any of these guys. They have no training. All 3 of them have no training in consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. No training in developing consciousness through yogic and or martial arts means. Not to the extent of like 6, 8, 10 years at least of development of those. Mm-hmm. And ascension is strictly a salvation theology that was prevalent in Egypt like 4,000 years ago. And it failed then, and it'll fail now. But a lot of people like the idea that they can go to some guru or something, even like when I was teaching. You come here and in one class, you're not going to get it, Mm-hmm. It's just that this becomes a method for you to explore your own consciousness or explore your own growth, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea that you ascend from one level of consciousness into some spiritual nirvana just isn't going to happen. I got news for you, right?
Not in the physical body?
Yeah, and I can say that because in 72 years, I've not met anybody who has done that through that kind of knowledge or practice. And I'm
Yeah.
willing to discuss that with anybody that wants to get into it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah. I mean, that's another topic for another day, and I'm not just
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
bucket here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it. Even
I
from the
get wound
Catholic
up.
Church.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even being raised Catholic, right? Ascension was mostly, let me not say, well, the way I understood it was something you attain after you cease to exist in the human form, right? You
Right.
ascend.
Yeah.
It's not, and then right now with the physical, if you're in the physical body, I don't think you can ascend unless everybody is ascending together. Like if the human race ascended, then
Right.
at that point you won't even be aware that you
Exactly.
are, you're just gonna be
Okay.
all on that level, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So
Now, after all the people are going to be mad about what I just said, if you go in any direction, and this is part of the Chinese thing about, like back to any book of work, right?
hmm
If you are going to pay attention to ascension theology or salvation theology or any of the others, all that does is kind of point you in a direction. And remember, the idea of ascension and all this other stuff that goes on with that is that you should be a better person. Well, you can do that without any kind of theological training. You can work on being a better person. It doesn't require you to ascribe or study or practice or anything. Okay. And when you go, like in Kundalini yoga or Hatha yoga or any of these other things with these teachers out there, all you're going to learn is what they learn. Okay. You're not going to be advancing your own self. You may be advancing their work. And that's where we go. Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. Christ wasn't a Christian, right? And they were trying to present information that was coming through them to help benefit humans, let's say. And to me, you should do the same thing. You shouldn't have the same song or the same language necessarily, because you're a different person and it's a different time. And that's kind of what I've came up with all that. So again, it's not to find fault with it, but to find understanding that any of the practices we're talking about is a way for you to move forward in your own development and your own consciousness and your own growth as a human being. And so for that reason, people that study it, I'm okay with it, because at least they're trying to do something. Okay.
Yeah.
But don't drink the Kool-Aid, and don't just start all this bowing down stuff to whoever it is teaching it, including me. Okay. Especially me. All right.
That's right. But if you want to send me money, send me money.
Yeah.
Conversations with Roland's not cheap to me. Just kidding.
PayPal for anybody know.
Yeah, PayPal me, Cash App me, and all that stuff. Okay, no, I get that, Randy, and here's one of the reasons why I appreciate the diversity of religions and teachings and ways of expressing this understanding that we are the creator experiencing itself, right? And the challenge is just that unless you're there, it's tough to see that the word ascension or the word Kundalini awakening or a spiritual awakening are all trying to say that you have just expanded your consciousness, and as a human you're aware of a lot more information than you were before. And when you see the same things that you saw prior to having this spiritual transformative experience, you see that there's a lot more to it than just what you're seeing. Like There's a lot more to Randy, there's a lot more to the computers that we're using to record these conversations. And then you realize that they are actually conscious and alive and evolving, and you can see that everywhere. But in a way, some people, depending on whether or not they have different aspects of, like you talked about the theory of proximate reality, if they have different aspects of that proximate reality expanded, maybe a certain word would work for them. But really the end goal, and we talked about this before when I was talking about my family member, that I told them what everybody is doing when they're really helping you is just helping you love yourself even more, get to know yourself better, or understand that at some point, once you expand your consciousness enough, then you won't you know, need, like if you hear the word ascension, you're like, okay, I get it. That's not really what it means. No
Yeah.
one's not gonna ascend or something along those lines anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple things like elevation of consciousness means that you can look at something in a different way than when you were experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or when you're going to experience it. And then the second thing is Kundalini Yoga. What Master Ring was trying to tell me is he didn't know anybody to teach me internal martial arts, internal Kung Fu. So Qigong, Nigong, there's all these gongs out there. These are internal arts. And the thing that modern TV has done is martial arts is fighting. But in traditional Kung Fu, it's learning to be a doctor, literally, okay? And it's learning to, that you spend an equal amount of time in meditation as you do in actual physical fighting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they leave all that out because it's like watching paint dry, you know? I mean, you know, Bakwa, yeah, Bakwa is like, you know, hours of movement and you don't get anywhere. So, rather than walk in a circle, you're going to end up at the same place.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that to me, to be able to look, anybody should arrive by whatever means possible at being able to look at their life and not find fault to the point that they realize that right now you're alive. That's all that's important, right? Not who was mean to you or how bad it was or how hard you got beat or, you know, banged up or all these things, because all those things happen, that's true. But you're still alive becomes the most important thing. And I love it, like they write books. What's the purpose of life? To be alive, to stay alive. That's it, right?
There you go.
And life is going to work pretty hard to make sure you don't do that you don't make it. So,
yeah.
So that's the game that's going on, right? So.
Now, in your experience, where time has provided you opportunities to experience hardships or things you didn't want to experience, and then you've overcome them. Well, clearly you have, because you're here in your orange. By the way, I almost wore an orange polo. That was my intuition, and I thought it's going to be too bright. And I come up here, and you're wearing an orange polo. That's insane.
And that's how I picked the shirt. I went in and went, I'm going to wear this, and then I reached over and picked this one up and put it on.
You're kidding.
Because,
I should.
No, because this was the one I was supposed to put on. That's your intuition.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't.
That was my first one.
I don't know why. Yeah, I was just, there you go. Because we all are connected, and that's the other thing. You get to a point to where your focus in the world is not just you, okay? We call it a child's focus is me, right? Or vote for me. That's another child's focus. But anyway,
the politicians are going to come after us today, Randy.
But you get to a point where it's not just the ego at work, but you actually connect up to the information flows that are around you, and that gets into the whole big deal I'm trying to explain through reality and proximity and things like that. So
but yeah, I thought, I mean, I'm just mentioning it now, but it really was my first choice, was an orange polo, and I thought, oh, this might be too bright, just look ridiculous, but we could have been matching. So Randy, with all the hardships that you've experienced, what have you learned that you can say in your life up to today are the benefits of going through hardships?
None. It's I've had a problem, and avoiding pain was not something I've been very good at in life. Okay, and so it's one of those things. If pain is a teacher, then I'm a master. I can tell you that.
I was not expecting that answer at all. Anyway,
like I said, the biggest thing I can come up with is that I tell people that have had a lot of abuse in their life, is number one, you're not special, okay? And it's a hard thing because some degree of special enters into therapy when you've been abused or beat or whatever. And you're not unique, I mean, lots of people have been beat, abused, whatever you want to call it. But the other thing is to recognize that you were available. And this gets into a real critical thing. You were available. You were in the right spot at the right time. And so we say that timeline that you were on involved that experience. In other words, it was kind of already in the queue, right? Now, it doesn't deal with fate or things like that. I'm starting a series of little podcasts, I hope, or stories. Going to be called X Timelines, and with me. And it's going to be a little show where I'm going to try to explain this. So, the experiences I had as a child were there. They were there to be had. I wasn't special. I just been born to that family or to that timeline, or that's the best way to look at it. And so in that timeline, it's kind of like watching a movie. You're going to get to see whatever's coming up next, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you're going to know how to deal with it. You're too. So things happen that you have no knowledge of. You have no way to deal with it. You didn't have a skill set or a mind that would allow you to deal with what happened or what was happening. Go get a stick so I can, a switch so I can beat you. You see what I mean? Or get my belt. And you would go get the belt, like, what is wrong with this equation? And then they would beat you. And then
I should laugh.
Put the belt up, and you're like, that makes no sense, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But it happens. Number one, you're not special. You were available, meaning you didn't have the resources somewhere else, or to be older or bigger or have a way to defend yourself. You see all that, but that's the fantasy that comes in, that I should have done something different. And the answer is no. You throw all that out the window and go, I made it. I made it past that event. And at some point in my life, I don't need to be mad about it, concerned about it, or have energy for it. Because if I still have energy for that person, that conversation, or that event, we're going to call it PTSD. The ability to re-experience a negative experience in such a way that elicits an emotional, mental, physiological, neurochemical response. And we call that a waste of time because you've already been through it once. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, when people say, has anything bad ever happened to you? The answer to me is no, right? And what that means is I've gotten rid of the energy and the information and my responses that would require me to be all wacko about what happened when I was 12 years old or 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
So
you would say the benefit then, maybe, just picking up what you just said here and trying to use my own words, would be that you can learn to not be attached to them in the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
That you can learn to overcome them. And then also that when you say you're not special, are you talking from the perspective of the creator? Because I get it from the perspective of the creator. Because if I'm the creator of all things, and if I say Randy is special, then Roland's special too. And if everybody's special, then nobody's special, right? Like, is that what you mean, or do you mean something else?
Well, what I refer to is an individual's attempt to provide meaning to what's going on. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the answer is, there's no meaning to your daddy beating you. There's none, right? Mm-hmm. It's like they have problems, is what I call it, and they're going to work out those problems with what's available within their approximate reality, which in this case was me or my sisters or brother or the dog or cat or whoever, wives, whatever. That's all. They're going to work out their problems within their approximate reality. They're within their 3 feet or 10 feet or 20 feet or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They're not going to work it out with the people in the next block. They don't know them. So you're not particularly special in the way that the ego wants you to have some sort of specialness to answer why the hell you got beat, why the hell you got abused, why the hell you didn't do this or do that or whatever, right?
So you're speaking at it from the point that folks shouldn't necessarily blame themselves for what happened.
Oh yeah,
to try to understand, right?
Hawkins, blame and shame are the lowest levels of consciousness on this scale of consciousness.
Yeah.
And power versus force, and And in one way, if we go back to that ascension thing, it's like you would climb up that scale of consciousness. You would go out of blame and shame. And you only have to listen to yourself. That's what I tell people. If you look at Hawkins' scale of consciousness, power versus force, you can hear yourself going, God, I'm mad at the traffic or the weather or whatever. That's anger. That's 140 or whatever on this scale. Mm-hmm. Or I really don't feel like doing anything today. It's Monday. That's apathy, 120 or something. You see, it's like you can find yourself, and that's a level of consciousness. And then the idea is to break out of that, to where you have the courage to be yourself and face the world. Because all those negative experiences you had should let you know that you are capable of surviving it and moving forward in life and not being attached to the past, right? And that's why the timeline. That's why. Keep moving. That's the language. Keep moving. Don't stop.
And you don't have a choice anyway, because
exactly
consciousness will move. And I mean, but that's great. I mean, you ended up with a great benefit that I have come to understand are what we might term as negative experiences that we have, like what they provide, that we are more than those experiences, way more than. And if we think those experiences are bad, and you can look at your own life, whoever's listening to this, there was a point 5 years ago where you thought the experience you were having was going to end you. And since then, they have expanded and been more difficult experiences that you've had, and you've survived it. And trust me, more is on the horizon.
Oh, yes. The primary skill set, of course, they don't teach in school is what I call get over yourself.
What's up? Today's so get over yourself. You're not special.
That's
You're just available.
Now that being available thing you change by your consciousness. Now that becomes the meditative, bakwa, all the different martial arts and yoga and everything. Is to improve your quality of awareness. And of course, I teach the ultimate martial art. I tell people it's called don't be there. So when the fight starts, don't be there. Leave the party 3 minutes before, or don't go in the store that's getting robbed. Why do you want to spend your life learning martial arts of fights when you could just step away from it?
Somebody has to record it for the Reddit subreddit. Our public freakout. So that's why somebody's got to record it.
Right.
Randy, there was the way you spoke, to finish the last point that you made, and you talked about Newton's scale of consciousness. I know that's a conversation we're planned on having, and I think we should do those. I would like that very much, actually.
Oh yeah. And one of the things,
and I think it's valuable.
Remember that eidetic memory thing? I've studied a lot, we'll put it. And when I saw David and he first presented this in one of the first lectures he did, I was able to attend that. And afterwards I said, David, I have already know all this stuff, meaning I had the same bodies of knowledge that he had drawn from, but he put them in a format that made them usable. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing about like science fiction or imagination or anything else out there. Mm-hmm. Imagination into reality is being able to bring that into something that is usable in this reality. Yes. And if you can do that, you're a successful person, right?
Yes.
You're successful at expressing yourself. So
I couldn't agree more, because I feel very similar when I read so many of these books, and I'm very fascinated by how they brought that information in, whether they're using numbers or the way David Hawkins describes it in his book, Power versus Force, or the Bhagavad Gita, like all these other books, all this information, the way it's brought down. And I've always joked that if you really wanted to be famous, you could study a rock and find a way to explain how that rock explains the universe or is the universe. And if you can do it in a practical way, then you'll be like, oh, look at what this guy just did, because this creator is encoded in everything. And
exactly.
But That is so true, and yeah, we should discuss it, because even when I read that scale that David Hawkins put together, I see how just in America, the U.S. government uses every aspect to kind of help propel people through those different levels of consciousness.
Right.
Like all of it's available to you. I mean, the top maybe not so much, because there are not very many people there. But you see fear being used, you see anger, you see all of that being used.
Oh yeah.
So much.
I express them as, each of them is what we call a current, like in a river or in time. This is the ones I use, and the current can be flowing fast or slow. It could be present or non-present, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that are, and Hawkins uses numbers, which I like, because numbers don't have emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between 2 and 5 and 10? Who the heck cares, right? So when you take the emotion out of it, now you're able to like move a little quicker through your thoughts and opinions, ideas, and things like that. And the other part is he's using a pure form of intuition to arrive at those answers. And what that means is he's arriving at answers without any bias or any prejudice, okay? It's kind of like at 5 o'clock. What difference does that make? It's Monday. Well, if you say it's Monday, here comes the prejudices and programming, and I got to go to work. And, all these things start kicking in. You're like, wait a minute. Monday has no meaning. 5 o'clock has no meaning, because you give meaning to things. And that's a critical aspect of what Hawkins is teaching. Because if you give meaning to anger, it'll consume you, okay? Mm-hmm. And if you look at it and go, well, like a deck of cards from 1 to 1,000, then why don't I pick being joyful? That's the one when I work on people, I reset them 540, joy. You should be joyful, because it's a great level to be alive and to be joyful. So, and it encompasses all other emotions. So that's, to me, that's really doing something. So
yeah, and we appreciate
like
it.
Go there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're right at an hour, Randy. I don't know what. I think the biggest thing I'll take away is the fact that you're not special.
Yeah.
I love that so much. But I mean, without saying, let's end here. I don't know if there's anything else that you think was part of your life experience that you thought is worth sharing. Well,
what we went through is the fact that what was formative, let's say all the abuse and poverty and things like that, don't have to define you, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that rising above, that ascension can take place through the study of something different. In this case, martial arts and Eastern philosophy, we say, but it can occur through studying cookbooks or science fiction or anything else. In other words, there's going to be some path forward available to you. Even if you were in the middle of nowhere and had no books and no TV or anything else, nature is there to teach you. That's what, as Native Americans, that's what we use. Mm-hmm. Because all the information that we think we learn through schools and stuff is available through nature, through living in it. And that's why I say living on a riverbank or, for 3 months where you forage for your food and fish and hunt and all that, you can learn a lot about life. You can learn a lot about yourself. And of course, that's the two things that everybody's involved in, whether they realize or not.
Yep.
I just think that work is a horrible place to learn about yourself, right? So I think it's better a person learn about themselves through fun, through recreation, through being out and involving themselves in the world, not with a TV. And that's my opinion. Right? Yeah. So
unless they're watching Gaia.
Yeah.
Quantum Effect. Yeah. All conversations with Roland.
Our X timelines is going to be the new one where we start going through a lot of things like this.
Awesome.
Right?
So my family member gave me a hard time about the way I say your last name.
Oh, well, it took me to third grade to learn how to spell it, so don't feel alone now.
It's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys. I mean, you know how to connect with Randy Veitenheimer. Either on Gaia. I have links to his show on Gaia in the notes section of this podcast. You can check it out. We have recorded a bunch of conversations, Randy, and I'm always so grateful when you come back and
Well,
we can
I
talk.
have a great time. I'm glad to be able to talk to you. All right.
Yeah,
I
likewise.
think that, when we talk, it's like there's things that people can hear through us talking that would be beneficial to them, and that's my hope with all of it, right? And
Yeah.
then they find your show. They can find me, Randy Veitenheimer. They find it under email under Energydoktor, spelled with a K, Doktor, and so there we go, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Guys, absolutely. And you know how to connect with me too, Roland at Achenjang.com. If you have any questions about Randy, I can certainly make an introduction. Or you could just reach out to him directly. You don't need me to be a middleman for sure. Yeah.
And that's PayPal to Roland and to Randy. I always love that. Like the idea, 10, 20 years ago that somebody just send you money. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's an entire business too, right? I mean, that's like one of those things.
Oh, I know.
It's fascinating.
But people make me laugh. Right?
Indeed. All right. I mean, I'm excited. I think we should find time and talk about the David Hawking scale of consciousness here pretty soon. Yeah.
Well, and just to finish up, the things that we talked about, like the Kung Fu and Kundalini Yoga and things like that, they were became persistent themes as we go from literally 14 years old all the way up to present. I mean, I'm still studying Chinese martial arts. I'm still studying the meditative techniques and the internal arts and trying to write about them and teach about them. So that you can look at your own life and look at your own themes, your own timelines, and see what they are and see where they're going and whether you want to continue them or not. So, right?
Good point. Whether or not you want to continue
them. All right?
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. Thanks for watching, and as always, create an amazing day.
All right. I agree. Thank you, Roland.
Right. You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks, Randy.
Oh, that was fun.